It's time now for our weekly mental health check-in. We're taking a closer look at how the collapse of Buffalo Bills player Damar Hamlin may have impacted players and staff members on the field.
Plus, schools are moving away from traditional discipline tactics to put a greater focus on mental health.
Let's bring in Dr. Robi Ludwig for more on this. She is a psychotherapist and award-winning reporter. Good morning, Dr. Ludwig. Let's start with the case of Damar Hamlin. Millions were watching when Hamlin collapsed on the field, but the players also had a really emotional response to the tragedy. Now some fear they may be at risk for PTSD. What symptoms should they be watching out for, and what can they do to manage those symptoms?
So PTSD is when a traumatic event happens and your world no longer feels safe or predictable. Sometimes this means having nightmares, intrusive thoughts, not being able to feel safe, increased sometimes anxiety or depression too can be a part of it. And I think what's most important is that these players know if they are having this kind of response, it's completely understandable. It does not mean that they're weak. Many times sports guys are encouraged not to show emotion, but they do have psychological help available to these players. And I think talking in a group, allowing them to know that if they are having these kinds of intrusive reactions, it's understandable, there is treatment available, and talking about it, I think, as a group would be tremendously healing for all of them.
Let's talk about this discipline issue we mentioned a moment ago. The Wall Street Journal reports that more schools are opting out of suspensions for students. Instead, they're looking to address some of the underlying mental health issues for those who are struggling. Talk about, what kind of impact can suspensions have on kids, and what kind of support should they be getting?
Well, just like with any punishment, it can send the message to a student that they are bad, not their behavior, but that they are bad. And they internalize this kind of shame, and it doesn't really help them to experience themselves in a good way or with high self-esteem. If you're disciplining in the school, now I don't know how teachers feel about it because it means that they may have to double up as thinking like a therapist in addition to a teacher, but any kind of acting out is the reflection of an underlying issue. So this seemed to me more of a kinder approach where you have a child who at that age doesn't necessarily understand cause and effect, look at the impact their behavior has, to find out what is good about themselves. So it keeps a child's self-esteem intact and may help underlie or discover certain depressive issues or traumatic issues or anxiety issues. So I do really like this approach if teachers have access to that kind of training.
And finally, we want to highlight some support for new moms out there. The maternal mental health hotline was first launched in May of last year, but it received funding through December's spending bill. What sort of help can mothers get from the hotline, and why is it so needed?
Well, access to care is very difficult. So even if somebody wants some type of support or mental health support, sometimes finding the right caregiver in a timely manner is a lot more challenging than we really realize. And so new moms are very vulnerable emotionally and physically, hormonally. Sometimes they have very scary thoughts. They feel that they're not being a good enough mom, or sometimes physically they're just having experiences that are overwhelming. And then add exhaustion on top of that, and we have the perfect storm. So having access to care and culturally sensitive care is so key for new moms. And I support it. I think it's wonderful. And if we can continue to fund these kinds of programs, I think we'll see the benefits moving into the future.
Sounds like some great new programming out there. Dr. Robi Ludwig, thank you so much.
Thank you.